Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the importance of having primary exercises. And when I say that, and I mean it's important because we have to have exercises that we focus on, exercises that we use to build our muscle. And I don't care what your goals are, because all of us are trying to make progress. I don't care whether your primary outcomes are hypertrophy and physique or whether your primary outcomes are strength. We still require some consistent progressive overload in order to stimulate those things. And if you do not have a few core exercises that you use to build off of, that you do fairly consistently, you are not going to get there. In other words, the whole idea of muscle confusion really isn't true. And I'm not saying adding some new stuff in can't give some novel training response. But of course, if you're changing exercises too frequently and you don't have some movements that you keep in all the time, then guess what? You're spending too much time trying to adapt to a novel training response instead of laying down new tissue with progressing on certain movements. You're back over to learning new motor patterns and stuff all the time. So those need to be minor changes. For example, obviously you could rotate from a pull-up to a chin-up, fairly easily because it's such a similar motor pattern. But you can't make the big changes. And because we need big exercises to build our muscle, you can't use a bunch of small movements. It takes forever. It's too inefficient. That's not how muscle is built. Your big exercises will put most of your size on you. You're using the smaller movements to fill in the gaps towards whatever your specific goals are. And it could be to fill in the gaps because of the movements you chose, because no movement is complete. Right? There is no combination of 2 or 3 exercises on earth you could put together that's going to develop everything maximally. There's going to be some weak links in there. Some muscles are going to develop faster or slower than others, even in the primary movers of those exercises. But the big movements are what put the brunt of the size on us. They make good use of exercise economy. That is how we gain our muscle, which is, of course, how we gain our strength. So you need those exercises. Now, of course, these days I'm choosing to use, the squat, bench, deadlift, and the pull-up. Right? Those are for me at the moment. These are my core exercises. And even when I've changed them a little over time, I always like to go back to these because they're just such good staples. They're such good staples. They're time proven, and I have a lot of reasons why I choose these. And it's again, in part due to the popularity. The popularity is there for a reason. But it's also because we know how to coach them. We know an enormous amount about these exercises. That makes them good to use, right? That makes them superior by default, even if something else produced the exact same potential results. So that's one of my reasons for doing it, because I know how to coach them. I know a lot about the biomechanics of these movements. Therefore, that gives us an advantage. That makes them superior by default. And I do feel people are contrarians on that for no reason. It would be something like, let's say for phones or for cars or something else, if 95% of the market was made by one brand and there was one other small competitor out there that maybe has some small advantages, but because of the support for the other, because of all the information, the data, the aftermarket support, it would just be a better product because of the popularity. Does that make sense? This is something I routinely argue in other areas of interest of mine, by the way. So it's not just something I apply to lifting. The popularity is important. That automatically makes it better. And I know people don't like that sort of mindset. Some people like to be contrarians for the sake of being one, for the sake of being an individual, and I only care about getting the best whatever results we're trying to get. And to me, that makes something automatically superior. The amount of data and support that is there because of the popularity is an advantage. All other factors being equal, that would be an enormous knock the ball out of the park advantage. Okay, that's a huge advantage, and that cannot be understated. But I choose these for that reason, and here's the thing. when you're focusing on a handful of lifts as your main lifts, there's some things that you can do with them. Remember that number one, you can, as long as you're focusing on improving on those, you know that you're always gaining muscle. Okay? Because you're not relearning new movements and you're consistent with those, you generally know that improvements in performance on your tried and true staple exercises for you is going to equal muscle growth. Again, assuming the form is consistent and whatever, obviously, right? You'll be able to scale that with muscle growth. You'll be able to always program them with priority towards wherever you're weakest. You put a little more work into one of those. You can put more of your accessory work into improving those. Okay, and then obviously you would fill in the gaps of whatever's weak from it. But here's the other thing to think about. When people are like, oh man, my time is short, my recovery is short, what happens when you're in situations where your workouts have to be cut in half? Ooh. What happens when you're in situations where recovery is compromised due to some stuff going on? You're working extra hours at work. Maybe you got a newborn baby. You've got other stuff in your life. What do you fall back to? Your default movements. Okay, if you can't get anything else done, at least if you get your core exercises that are staples in your routine in, guess what? You're good still. You can at least maintain. Because if you keep those up, you keep your progress. So in my case, at this point, it would be, squat, bench, deadlift, pull-ups. I might add curls, the fifth one, because biceps have been such a problem for me, and they're really something I have to keep working on. I almost might need to add curls as my fifth. Whereas in all my other stuff, my calf work, my pullovers, maybe even my incline, those are more peripheral exercises, right? They're peripheral exercises. Secondary importance. Those others, those four, maybe that fifth one, those need to be done every week. And when you do it that way, you have that structure to fall back on, right? You have that structure to fall back on when you can't get other stuff done, when you have to compromise due to time, due to schedule, due to recovery. Okay? You always have your basics to fall back on. Now, what's funny, and I say that people are like, well, I would do this, so I don't care what you would do. I don't think they're better. I think what I have chosen are probably the best choices for my reasons. Now, I'm not saying you can't do you. Go pick what you want to pick for you. But don't expect me to think it's a good choice. But as long as you're sticking to the principles I'm discussing of your picking movements that work everything, and you can vary rep ranges and other stuff with them because of the nature of the exercises, hey, great. More power to you. And if that's what you need, or those exercises to make it work, you do you. I still think that's a good idea. But just every time I make a video like this, people come in and tell me, and they'll lift some god-awful exercise that I can't stand sometimes. It's funny. So just throwing that out there. Okay, just throwing that out there. I don't need to know what those are, because they usually neglect major muscle groups. It's like people will throw theirs out there, and I'm like, okay, so you don't care about your hamstrings at all. You're not going to have any hamstrings the rest of your life. You're going to have knee problems, or you're going to have no chest when they start listing their stuff. In fact, that's exactly what I've seen, by the way. When people say, well, these are mine, and I'm like, there's no hamstring or chest work at all. There's like zero. Like, you're going to be so imbalanced. You're going to have problems from this. But I digress. As long as they're relatively balanced, knock yourself out. Because at least you're sticking to those principles. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.